I never thought 3 little words could destroy everything I believed about love, trust, and the woman I was going to marry. But when Emily looked me straight in the eye and said, "I just need to focus on wedding planning alone. Please give me space," something in her tone made my stomach clench. This wasn't the excited, overwhelmed bride-to-be I'd been living with for the past 2 years. This was someone hiding something. We were sitting in our apartment's kitchen, the same spot where we'd celebrated getting engaged 6 months earlier. The morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the stack of wedding magazines on the counter and the small whiteboard where we'd been tracking our to-do list. Emily had her coffee mug gripped in both hands, knuckles white, avoiding eye contact. "Space?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Em, we're getting married in 3 months. This is supposed to be something we do together." She shook her head, blonde hair falling across her face like a curtain. "It's just, there's so much to coordinate. The vendors, the final head count, all these decisions. I work better when I can focus completely. You know how I get when I'm planning events." That part was true. Emily was an event planner, and she was damn good at her job precisely because she could laser focus on details that would make other people's heads spin. But this felt different. In all the time I'd known her, she'd never pushed me away when she was stressed. If anything, she usually wanted me closer. "Okay," I said slowly, "but what about the cake tasting on Thursday? The final venue walkthrough on Saturday? I'll handle them." She finally looked up, and I caught something flickering behind her green eyes. Guilt? Fear? "Trust me, Jake. I've got this under control." The word trust hit me like a physical blow, though I couldn't explain why. Emily had never given me a reason not to trust her. We'd built our relationship on honesty, communication, all those things the marriage counselors in the magazines said were essential. But something was off, and my architect's brain, trained to spot structural problems before they became catastrophic, was sending up red flags. "All right," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. It felt cold, and she pulled away too quickly. "Whatever you need." She smiled then, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you. I love you." "I love you too." But as I watched her gather her things and leave for work, I wondered when those words had started feeling like lines from a script we'd both memorized. The first week of Emily's wedding planning space passed in an uncomfortable blur. She left early, came home late, and spent most of her time in our spare bedroom with the door closed, allegedly making calls to vendors and finalizing details. When I tried to ask how things were going, she'd give me vague updates about progress and complications that needed her full attention. I threw myself into work, designing a new commercial complex downtown that required most of my mental energy. But in the quiet moments, during lunch breaks, the drive home, those empty minutes before sleep, my mind kept circling back to Emily's strange behavior. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down at dinner, how she'd stopped mentioning specific vendors or showing me fabric samples like she used to, the fact that she'd changed her laptop password, something she'd never bothered with before. On Thursday evening, I decided to surprise her. She'd mentioned having a late meeting with the florist, so I picked up her favorite Thai food and headed to her office. Maybe we could grab a quick dinner together, and I could see if her stress was just work-related or something deeper. The building was mostly empty when I arrived, just a few offices still lit on the upper floors. Emily's company occupied the 3rd floor, and I could see through the glass doors that most of the lights were off. I used my key, Emily had given it to me last year, and made my way to her office. Empty. I checked my phone. No messages. According to her calendar app, which we shared, she was supposed to be here until 8. It was 7:30. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I sat in her chair, staring at the desktop computer she'd left running. The screensaver showed photos from our trip to Napa last year, both of us laughing, wine-drunk and happy, Emily's engagement ring catching the sunlight. The woman in those photos looked like a stranger now. I was about to leave when her assistant, Monica, poked her head around the corner. "Jake? What are you doing here?" "Looking for Emily. She said she had a meeting with the florist." Monica frowned. The florist. We wrapped that contract up 2 weeks ago. Emily left around 4 today, said she was done for the week. The Thai food suddenly felt like concrete in my hands. Done for the week? Yeah, she seemed really excited about something, kept checking her phone and smiling. Monica paused, probably reading the confusion on my face. Is everything okay? Fine, I lied. I must have misunderstood. But as I drove home through the darkening city, I knew I hadn't misunderstood anything. Emily had lied to me. The question was why. I was halfway through a beer and a reheated container of pad thai when my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Sasha, Emily's best friend since college, had posted to her story. I almost ignored it. Sasha's social media was usually an endless stream of yoga poses and inspirational quotes, but something made me tap on it. The first few slides were typical Sasha content. Her green smoothie, a sunset photo with some profound caption about gratitude. But then I saw it. A photo of a crowded rooftop bar, city lights twinkling in the background. The caption read, "Best surprise ever," with a bunch of heart emojis. It looked like one of those trendy spots downtown, the kind of place that charged $20 for a cocktail and had a 3-week waiting list for reservations. I was about to swipe past when I caught sight of something that made my blood freeze. There, partially obscured by Sasha's raised champagne glass, but unmistakably clear, was Emily. She was sitting at a high-top table, laughing at something, her hair styled in the elaborate updo she only did for special occasions. And sitting across from her, leaning in close enough that their heads were almost touching, was a man I recognized. Ryan Walsh, Emily's ex-boyfriend from college. My hand was shaking as I screenshot the image, then watched the story again. And again. Each time, I noticed new details that felt like knife wounds. Emily was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for her birthday, the one she said made her feel beautiful. Ryan's hand was resting on the table dangerously close to hers. They both looked comfortable, intimate, like they'd done this 100 times before. The story disappeared after 15 seconds, but I had my screenshot. I stared at it until my eyes burned, trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they'd run into each other. Maybe Sasha was there too, just outside the frame. But even as I ran through the possibilities, I knew I was lying to myself. You don't wear your best dress and style your hair for a coincidence. You don't lean in that close to someone you've accidentally encountered. And you definitely don't look that happy if the meeting was unwanted. I spent the rest of the night pacing around our apartment, checking my phone every few minutes to see if Emily had texted. She didn't. At midnight, I heard her key in the lock. "Hey," she called softly, probably assuming I was asleep. "Sorry I'm so late. The meeting ran forever." I was sitting in the living room, lights off, nursing my third beer. How was the florist? There was a pause. I could hear her setting down her purse, the soft sound of her heels on the hardwood floor. "Good, really good. We got everything sorted out." "That's great." I kept my voice carefully neutral. "Monica mentioned you left the office early today." Another pause, longer this time. When Emily appeared in the doorway, she was backlit by the hallway light, her face in shadow. Monica must have been confused. I was in and out of the office all day for appointments. The lie hung in the air between us like a living thing. I could feel the weight of the screenshot on my phone, burning a hole in my pocket. But something held me back from confronting her directly. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe it was the faint hope that I was wrong, that there was an explanation I hadn't considered. "I'm exhausted," she said, moving toward the bedroom. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." "Emily." She stopped, turned back. In the dim light, I could see the nervous tension in her shoulders. "Yeah? Are we okay?" "Of course we are," but her voice was too bright, too quick. "Why would you ask that?" "You just seem distant lately." She came back into the living room, perched on the arm of my chair. Her perfume was different, something expensive and floral that I didn't recognize. "I'm sorry, baby. I know I've been crazy with all this wedding stuff. It's just important to me that everything's perfect, you know? Once we get through these next few months, everything will go back to normal. She leaned down and kissed my forehead, and for a moment, I wanted to believe her. This was Emily, the woman who'd held my hand through my father's funeral, who'd celebrated with me when I got my biggest client, who'd said yes when I proposed on the beach in Santa Monica with tears streaming down her face. We'd built a life together. We had a future planned. But her lips felt cold against my skin, and when she pulled away, I saw something flicker across her expression that looked almost like relief. "Get some sleep," she murmured. "I love you. Love you too." But as I listened to the shower running and thought about the image burned into my memory, Emily and Ryan, heads together in that intimate bubble of laughter and champagne, I realized that love might not be enough anymore. The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone early to meet with the caterer. Call you later. XOXOE." I sat in our kitchen, staring at her handwriting and drinking coffee that tasted like ash, trying to figure out what the hell was happening to my life. 6 months ago, everything had been perfect. We'd been planning our future together, talking about honeymoon destinations and whether we wanted kids right away or should wait a few years. Now I felt like I was living with a stranger. I called in sick to work, something I'd done maybe 3 times in my entire career, and spent the morning doing something I never thought I'd do, investigating my own fiancée. It started with social media. I went through Emily's recent posts with the methodical attention I usually reserved for architectural blueprints. Her Instagram was still full of our couple photos and wedding planning content, but I noticed she'd stopped tagging our location when we went out together. Her Facebook activity had dropped off significantly in the past month, and her LinkedIn showed she'd been liking a lot of posts from Ryan's new architectural firm. That last detail hit me like a punch to the gut. Ryan Walsh was an architect, just like me. We'd actually been in the same program at USC, though we'd run in different circles. He was one of those golden boy types, good-looking, charming, from a wealthy family that had connections throughout the city. The kind of guy who got opportunities handed to him while the rest of us worked twice as hard for half the recognition. I remembered Emily mentioning him when we first started dating. They'd been together for most of college, apparently serious enough that she'd thought they might get married after graduation. But Ryan had gotten an offer from a firm in Chicago and hadn't asked her to come with him. He chose his career over us, she'd told me, with what I thought was resigned acceptance. I guess I learned something about what I really wanted in a partner. That conversation had made me feel good about myself, honestly. I was the guy who chose Emily, who wanted to build a life with her, who proposed because I couldn't imagine a future that didn't include her. I was everything Ryan hadn't been. Except now Ryan was back. I found his LinkedIn profile and felt my stomach sink further. He'd returned to Los Angeles 3 months ago to open a satellite office for his Chicago firm. 3 months. Right around the time Emily had started acting strange, started needing space for wedding planning. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. I was deep in a Google rabbit hole cross-referencing Emily's calendar with Ryan's social media posts when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Jake Morrison?" "Yes." "Mr. Morrison, this is Detective Rebecca Torres with the LAPD. I understand you were asking about private investigation services?" I sat up straighter. I hadn't been asking about private investigation services. "I think you have the wrong number." "Oh." A pause. "I apologize. Someone called yesterday asking about domestic investigation services and left this number. Must have been a mistake." The call ended, but it left me with an idea that I couldn't shake. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the photo from Sasha's story was innocent. Maybe Emily really was just stressed about the wedding, and I was letting paranoia poison what should be the happiest time of our lives. Or maybe I needed to know the truth. I found Torres Investigations online. Rebecca Torres was a former LAPD detective who specialized in matrimonial investigations, cheating spouses, asset searches, background checks. Her website was professional and discreet, with testimonials from clients who discovered everything from hidden assets to secret families. Reading those testimonials made me feel sick. These were people who'd thought they knew their partners, who'd built lives on foundations that turned out to be quicksand. Was I about to join their ranks? I made the call before I could lose my nerve. Torres Investigations. Hi, this is Jake Morrison. I think I need your help. An hour later, I was sitting across from Rebecca Torres in her small office in Century City. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that probably served her well in law enforcement. Her desk was covered with case files and surveillance photos, a reminder that other people's secrets were her daily business. "So," she said, after I'd explained the situation, "you want to know if your fiancée is having an affair with her ex-boyfriend?" Hearing it stated so bluntly made me flinch. I want to know what's going on. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's an innocent explanation. Torres leaned back in her chair, studying me. In my experience, when someone's gut tells them something's wrong, they're usually right. But I understand wanting proof. What would that involve? Surveillance, primarily. I'd follow your fiancée for a few days, document where she goes, who she meets with. If there's an affair happening, we'll find evidence. Photos, video, whatever you need. And if there isn't, then you can go into your marriage with peace of mind. The price she quoted made me wince, $150 an hour plus expenses. But I thought about the $50,000 we'd already spent on wedding deposits. If Emily was cheating, I needed to know before I walked down that aisle. How quickly can you start? Today, if you want. I'll need some basic information, her schedule, vehicle description, photos, and Mr. Morrison? She leaned forward, her expression serious. Whatever I find, you need to be prepared for it. Sometimes the truth is harder than living with doubt. I gave her everything she needed, Emily's daily routine, her car details, recent photos from my phone. Signing the contract felt like a betrayal, but I told myself it was necessary. I was protecting myself, protecting our future. If Emily was innocent, no harm done. If she wasn't, I didn't let myself finish that thought. The next 2 days passed in a strange fog of normalcy. Emily continued her pattern of leaving early and coming home late, full of vague updates about wedding progress. I went to work, had dinner with friends, maintained the routine of our life together. But underneath the surface, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the call that would either save my relationship or destroy it. The call came on Wednesday evening. "We need to meet," Torres said. Her voice was carefully neutral, which somehow made it worse than if she'd sounded sympathetic. "Did you find something?" "We need to meet," she repeated. "Can you come to my office in an hour?" The drive to Century City felt like the longest hour of my life. I rehearsed what I would say to Emily, how I would handle different scenarios. If she was cheating, I'd call off the wedding immediately. If it was innocent, I'd confess about hiring Torres and we'd work through my trust issues in counseling. But no matter how many times I ran through the possibilities, I couldn't shake the dread that was settling in my chest like concrete. Torres was waiting for me with a manila folder on her desk. She gestured for me to sit, then poured 2 cups of coffee from a machine in the corner. The delay felt ominous. "I'm going to be direct," she said, settling into her chair. "Your fiancé is having an affair." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting them. "You're sure?" "Completely." She opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. These were taken yesterday afternoon. The first photo showed Emily's car parked outside an upscale hotel in Beverly Hills. The second showed Emily walking into the lobby, wearing a dress I'd never seen before. The third showed Ryan Walsh entering the same lobby 15 minutes later. "They met in the bar for drinks, then went upstairs together," Torres continued, her voice professionally detached. "They were up there for 3 hours. I have video of them in the lobby afterward and—" She paused, studying my face. The physical intimacy was obvious. She showed me the video on her laptop. Emily and Ryan in the hotel lobby, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. They looked like lovers. They looked like a couple. They looked happy. "How long?" I managed to ask. Based on what I observed and some discreet inquiries, at least 6 weeks. Possibly longer. 6 weeks. Right around the time Emily had started needing space for wedding planning. Torres pulled out another set of photos. I also documented some financial activity you might find interesting. These photos showed Emily at an expensive jewelry store, then at a high-end men's clothing boutique. The timestamps indicated she'd made these purchases during hours when she'd told me she was meeting with vendors. She bought him a watch, Torres said. Rolex, about $8,000. The clothing purchases were another $3,000. My head was spinning. How do you know she bought them for him? Torres showed me one final photo. Ryan wearing the watch, exiting the hotel with Emily. They were holding hands. I stared at the image until it blurred. This was Emily, the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. The woman who'd been lying to my face for weeks while planning our wedding and fucking her ex-boyfriend. There's more, Torres said gently. I've been monitoring some of their communications. Are you sure you want to hear this? I nodded, not trusting my voice. She's been telling him that she's having doubts about the marriage, that she feels trapped, that she made a mistake getting engaged. She's also been using your joint wedding account to pay for their hotel rooms and gifts. The joint wedding account. We'd each contributed $25,000 to cover all the wedding expenses. Emily had been stealing from it to fund her affair. How much? About $12,000 so far. I felt like I was going to throw up. What else? Torres hesitated. Based on their text messages, they're planning to be together after your wedding. After? She intends to go through with the ceremony, then leave you within 6 months. Apparently, they think it will be easier to divorce you than to call off the wedding, less embarrassing for her family. The room was spinning. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to marry me anyway, then divorce me after she'd gotten whatever she wanted out of the arrangement. The wedding that I thought was the beginning of our real life together was actually just an elaborate lie designed to cover her tracks. I'm sorry, Torres said, and for the first time, her professional facade cracked slightly. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time after leaving Torres's office, staring at the photos she'd given me. Emily smiling at Ryan over dinner. Emily's hand on his cheek as they kissed outside the hotel. Emily looking happier than I'd seen her in months. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, though that cut deep enough. It was the realization that the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd thought I knew completely, had never really existed. The Emily in those photos, laughing and touching and clearly in love, was the real Emily. The Emily who came home to me every night, who planned our wedding during the day and texted her lover during dinner, was the performance. I'd been living with a stranger for months, maybe longer, and I'd been too trusting, too stupid, too in love to see it. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Running late tonight, vendor crisis, don't wait up, love you. I stared at the message, knowing it was another lie. She was probably with Ryan right now, maybe at the same hotel where Torres had photographed them. Maybe they were laughing about how clueless I was, how easy it had been to fool me. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I drove home and spent the evening in our apartment, looking at everything with new eyes. The wedding magazines on the counter, props in her performance, the engagement photos on the wall, lies frozen in silver frames, the bed we shared, the same bed she came back to after being with him. When Emily finally came home at nearly midnight, I was sitting in the living room with all the lights off, just like I had that first night when I'd seen Sasha's Instagram story. But this time, I wasn't confused or suspicious. I was certain. Jake, she called softly. Are you awake? I'm here. She appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. Why are you sitting in the dark? Thinking. She came into the room, sat on the arm of my chair like she had before. Her perfume was the same expensive scent I'd noticed that night, the one I now realized was probably Ryan's preference. About what? I looked up at her face, searching for any sign of guilt or remorse. But she just looked tired, maybe a little concerned. If I hadn't seen the photos, I would have believed her performance completely. The wedding, I said. All the details you've been handling alone. Oh, she relaxed slightly. It's coming together really well. I think you're going to be so happy with how everything looks. I'm sure I will be. She leaned down and kissed my forehead, the same cold press of lips I'd felt before. I love you, Jake. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. She did love me in her way. She loved the security I provided, the stability, the respectable future I represented. She just loved Ryan more. After she went to bed, I sat in the darkness for another hour, planning my next move. I could confront her directly, show her the photos, demand an explanation. But Emily was a professional event planner. She was used to thinking on her feet, managing crises, controlling narratives. If I gave her warning, she'd find a way to spin this, to minimize it, to make me the bad guy for not trusting her. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to control the timing, the setting, the audience. I needed to make sure that when the truth came out, there would be no way for her to deflect or manipulate the situation. I needed to plan my own event. The next morning, I called in sick to work again and spent the day making arrangements. First, I visited a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but Sarah Chen, who specialized in wedding law and contract disputes. I'd found her through a Google search for wedding cancellation attorney, and her reviews suggested she was both thorough and ruthless. Let me understand this correctly, Sarah said, reviewing the photos and documentation Torres had provided. Your fiancé has been having an affair, using joint funds to finance it, and planning to marry you under false pretenses with the intention of divorcing you shortly after? That's right. And you have documented proof of all of this? Everything except the divorce plan. That's based on text messages the private investigator intercepted. Sarah leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at her lips. Mr. Morrison, you have grounds for several lawsuits here. Fraud, breach of contract, misappropriation of funds. Depending on how you want to handle this, we can recover your financial losses and potentially pursue additional damages. What would you recommend? That depends on what you want to achieve. Do you want justice or do you want revenge? I thought about Emily coming home every night and lying to my face, about her planning our wedding while texting her lover, about the way she'd kissed my forehead and told me she loved me while stealing our money to buy gifts for another man. Both, I said. Sarah smiled. Then we're going to need to be very strategic about this. Over the next hour, she outlined a plan that was both legally sound and emotionally satisfying. We would gather additional evidence, document all financial losses, and then orchestrate a confrontation that would provide maximum legal protection while ensuring Emily couldn't control the narrative. The key, Sarah explained, is timing and witnesses. We want her to admit to the affair in front of people who matter, her family, your family, mutual friends. That way, when this inevitably becomes public, you're not the bad guy who called off the wedding for mysterious reasons. You're the victim who discovered his fiancée's betrayal. When? Next weekend. I understand you have a family dinner planned to discuss final wedding details? I nodded. Emily had arranged a dinner at her parents' house for both families to go over last-minute logistics. It was supposed to be a celebration, a final gathering before the big day. Perfect, Sarah said. That's our venue. I spent the rest of the week in suspended animation. Emily continued her routine of leaving early and coming home late, full of wedding updates that I now knew were lies. I nodded and smiled and played the excited groom while feeling like I was watching my life from outside my body. Torres provided daily updates on Emily's activities. She was still meeting Ryan regularly, still spending our money on him, still planning our wedding between affair appointments. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How could someone compartmentalize their life so completely? On Friday, Emily seemed excited about the family dinner. She spent an hour getting ready, choosing a dress with the care she reserved for special occasions. I can't wait for everyone to hear about all the final touches, she said, checking her reflection. Your mom is going to love what we did with the flowers. I'm sure she will, I said, watching her performance with a mixture of admiration and disgust. Even knowing what I knew, she was completely convincing. Are you okay? She asked, catching my expression. You seem tense. Just wedding nerves, I said. She turned and took my hands. Hey, look at me. We're going to have the most beautiful wedding, and then we're going to have the most amazing life together. I promise." Looking into her eyes, I almost believed her. That was the terrifying part. Emily wasn't just lying to me, she was lying to herself. She genuinely believed she could have both Ryan and me, could build a future with me while planning to leave me for him. "I love you," she said and kissed me softly. "I love you too," I replied, and meant it. That was the cruelest irony. I still loved her, even knowing what she'd done. I loved the woman I'd thought she was, the life that had never really existed. But love wasn't enough anymore. Saturday evening arrived with perfect California weather. Emily's parents had set up a long table on their Brentwood patio, decorated with white flowers and flickering candles. Both families were there. 12 people gathered to celebrate our upcoming union. I arrived early, carrying a leather portfolio with all the evidence Torres had gathered. Emily arrived radiant in a white sundress, playing the glowing bride-to-be perfectly. "Emily has been keeping all the wedding details close to the vest," Margaret said. "We're dying to hear about everything you've been planning." Emily launched into detailed descriptions of flowers, menu, timeline. She spoke with such enthusiasm that I wondered if any of it was true, or if she'd just gotten very good at improvising. "And the honeymoon?" my mother asked. "Jake wanted it to be a surprise," Emily said, glancing at me. "But I can tell you it's going to be incredible." That was news to me. We talked about destinations but made no firm plans. "To Jake and Emily, and to a beautiful future together," Emily's father said, raising his glass. Everyone toasted. The sound felt like a death knell. I waited until after dinner, when everyone was relaxed. The conversation had turned to memories of us as a couple, stories about how perfect we were together. The irony was suffocating. "Actually," I said, standing and reaching for my portfolio, "there's something I need to share with everyone." Emily looked up, probably expecting a romantic toast. Her smile was radiant, trusting, completely unprepared. These past few weeks, Emily has been asking for space to handle wedding planning alone, I began. I wanted to respect that, but some things came to my attention that everyone should know about. I pulled out the first photograph, Emily and Ryan entering the hotel lobby, and placed it in the center of the table. The silence was immediate and absolute. Emily's face went white. "Jake, what?" "This was taken 3 days ago. These show Emily with her ex-boyfriend, Ryan Walsh, at the Beverly Hills Hotel. They've been having an affair for at least 6 weeks. Margaret gasped. Emily's father leaned forward, studying the images analytically. My parents sat frozen. "I understand perfectly." I placed down financial records. These show purchases Emily made using our joint wedding account. $8,000 for a Rolex watch she gave to Ryan, $3,000 for clothing, multiple hotel charges. Emily was standing now, tears streaming. "Please, just let me explain." These are communications between Emily and Ryan, discussing their plans to be together after our wedding. They decided it would be easier for Emily to marry me first, then divorce me in a few months. The silence stretched like a physical thing. Margaret was crying, staring at her daughter like she'd never seen her before. "Is this true?" Emily's father asked quietly. Emily collapsed into her chair, face buried in her hands. Finally, she looked up, mascara streaking. "I never meant for this to happen." "When did it start?" I asked, surprisingly calm. 2 months ago. He came back to LA. We ran into each other. I thought I was over him, but seeing him again. You lied to me every day for 2 months. You planned our wedding while you were with him. You stole our money to buy him gifts. I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure things out. By marrying me first? Emily's father slammed his hand on the table. "Emily Margaret Davidson, what the hell is wrong with you?" "I was confused," she whispered. "I do love Jake. I love both of them. I thought maybe after the wedding these feelings would go away." "So you were going to use our son as a backup plan?" my father said, voice tight with anger. "But you did hurt someone," Rachel said quietly. "You hurt Jake. You've been hurting him for months." I looked around the table at faces that had loved us both. Margaret stared at her daughter with horror and disappointment. Emily's grandmother looked like she'd aged 10 years in minutes. "How did you obtain these photographs?" Emily's father asked, his lawyer instincts taking over. "I hired a private investigator," I said. After Emily started acting strangely, and I saw her with Ryan on social media. "This is invasion of privacy," Emily said desperately. "You had me followed?" "I had my fiancée followed because she was lying to me every single day, because she was stealing from our joint account to fund an affair." Emily's father studied the financial documents, his expression darkening. $12,000. Emily, you stole $12,000 from your wedding fund? "It's not stealing," Emily protested weakly. "It was my money, too." "Money designated for your wedding to Jake," Margaret said, finding her voice. "Money you used to betray him." Emily looked around desperately, searching for an ally, but every face reflected shock, disappointment, and anger. "Jake, please, can we talk privately?" she begged. "There are things you don't understand." "No," I said firmly. "No more private conversations, no more lies." I pulled out the legal papers Sarah Chen had prepared. "These are formal notices of contract breach and fraud. You'll be served officially Monday." "You're suing me?" "Yes." The word fell like a guillotine blade. Emily buried her head in her hands. "The wedding is canceled," I announced. "The engagement is over. Emily can keep the ring. She'll need to sell it to pay back what she stole." I stood up, gathering the photographs. Everyone sat in stunned silence. "I'm sorry," I said to Margaret and Emily's father. "I know this isn't how anyone wanted this evening to go, but I couldn't let this continue." Margaret nodded through her tears. "You did the right thing, Jake. I'm so sorry for what my daughter has done." Emily looked up sharply. "Mom? Don't," Margaret said, her voice hard. "Don't you dare ask me to take your side. What you did is inexcusable." I started toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Emily one last time. "I would have understood if you'd fallen out of love with me," I said quietly. "If you'd come to me and said you weren't ready for marriage, wanted to call off the wedding, I would have respected your honesty." Emily shook her head, tears flowing. "But you didn't do that. You chose to lie. You chose to steal. You chose to plan our wedding while fucking your ex-boyfriend. You chose to make me complicit in my own humiliation, and that, Emily, is something I will never forgive." The silence was broken only by Emily's sobbing and the distant city hum. "Goodbye, Emily," I said. And then I walked away from the woman I'd planned to spend my life with, from the future we'd built together, from the lie that had been masquerading as love. Behind me, I heard Margaret's voice. "Emily, how could you do this? How could you hurt someone who loved you so much?" But I didn't stay to hear Emily's answer. I was done listening to her lies. I sat in my car for a long time, hands shaking as adrenaline faded into raw pain. Through the window, I could see the family still gathered, trying to make sense of what had happened. Emily was crying. Her father was on his phone, probably calling their lawyer, and Margaret stared at the photographs like they might rearrange themselves into something more palatable. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Are you okay?" I typed back, "I'm fine. Go home. I'll call you tomorrow." But I wasn't fine. I was gutted, hollowed out, a walking shell of the man who'd woken up that morning still hoping maybe I was wrong about Emily. There wasn't. There never had been. The woman I'd loved had been a performance all along. The real Emily could compartmentalize so completely that she could plan our wedding in the morning and meet her lover in the afternoon. The drive home felt surreal, like navigating through a dream where familiar landmarks had been rearranged. I let myself into our apartment, my apartment now, and looked at all the traces of our life together. Engagement photos on the mantel, wedding planning materials on the coffee table, the champagne we'd been saving for the night before our wedding. Everything felt like evidence of a crime. I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and sat in my chair, the same chair where I'd sat that first night when I'd seen Sasha's Instagram story and known something was wrong. I'd ignored that instinct, let Emily's reassurances override my own perception of reality. Never again. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Emily and 4 voicemails I didn't listen to. But there was one message that surprised me. From Torres, the private investigator. Mr. Morrison, I saw the news about tonight. Well done. Also, you should know, Emily's been trying to reach Ryan all evening. He's not answering. I almost smiled at that. Emily's grand romantic gesture, destroying our relationship for her college boyfriend, and he wasn't even taking her calls. I was halfway through my second whiskey when I heard Emily's key in the lock. "Jake?" she called tentatively. "Are you here?" I didn't answer. When she appeared in the living room doorway, she looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her makeup was gone, cried away, and her white dress was wrinkled and stained. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't. Please." She sat on the edge of the couch. "Let me explain." "Explain what? How you lied to me for 2 months? How you stole our money? How you were planning to marry me as cover while you figured out your real feelings?" Emily flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like, Emily. Tell me how planning our wedding while fucking your ex-boyfriend was somehow different." She was crying again. "I never meant for this to happen. When Ryan came back, I thought I was over him. But being with him again, I realized I'd never really gotten over him. So you decided to have both of us. I was trying to choose. I do love you, Jake. I love the life we built together. But with Ryan, it's different. It's like finding a piece of myself I thought was lost forever." I stared at her, marveling at her ability to make betrayal sound like romantic self-discovery. "And you couldn't figure that out without lying to me? Without stealing from me?" "I was scared," she whispered. "Scared of losing you, scared of making the wrong choice. So you decided to hurt me anyway, just later. I was paralyzed, Jake. I couldn't choose between you, so I tried to keep both of you until I could figure out what to do. By planning to divorce me after 6 months, that was Ryan's idea. He said it would be easier than calling off the wedding, less humiliating for everyone." "Less humiliating." I laughed bitterly. "You thought marrying me and then leaving me would be less humiliating than just breaking up with me?" Emily stood up, pacing. "I know I fucked up, but we can fix this. We can work through this. People get past affairs all the time. This wasn't an affair, Emily. This was fraud. Don't be so dramatic." Her casual dismissal hit me like a physical blow. I walked to the window, looked out at the city lights that had once represented possibility. "Do you love him?" I asked without turning around. "What?" "Ryan, do you love him?" Emily was quiet for so long that I finally turned to look at her. She was staring at the floor, tears streaming. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I do." "More than me?" "I don't know. It's different. What I feel for you is safe, comfortable, real life. What I feel for him is—" "What?" "Fire," she said quietly. "It's like fire." I nodded, feeling something settle into place in my chest. "Then you've made your choice." "No, I haven't. I can choose you. I can choose us. We can work through this." "But you don't want to." Emily opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Because we both knew the truth. She wanted Ryan, wanted that fire, wanted the man who'd inspired her to lie and steal and risk everything. "I'll end things with Ryan," she said finally. "We can go to counseling, work on rebuilding trust. And in 5 years when he comes back again, or when you meet someone else who makes you feel like fire, that won't happen." "How do I know that? How do I ever trust you again?" I turned to face her fully. "Emily, you looked me in the eye every day for 2 months and lied to me. You planned our wedding while you were with him. You stole our money. You were going to marry me knowing you wanted someone else. How do I ever believe another word you say?" "Because I'm telling you the truth now. Only because you got caught." Emily sank back onto the couch, defeated. "So that's it? 6 years together, and you're just going to throw it all away?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I said quietly. "You already did that." We sat in silence, the weight of our ended relationship settling between us like dust. "What happens now?" Emily asked finally. "Now you pack your things and leave. The lease is in my name. You can stay with your parents or Sasha or Ryan, I don't care. My attorney will be in touch about recovering the money you stole." "Jake, please—" "And Emily?" I looked at her one last time. "Don't contact me. Don't call. Don't text, don't show up here. We're done. Emily nodded, tears flowing freely. She gathered a few things from the bedroom. When she came back with a small suitcase, she looked like a stranger. I really did love you, she said from the doorway. I know, I replied. I loved you too. And then she was gone, taking her keys and her lies with her, leaving me alone in the apartment we'd shared, surrounded by the remnants of a future that had never really existed. I sat back down, poured another whiskey, and tried to figure out how to rebuild a life that had been built on foundations of sand. Tomorrow, I would call vendors and cancel everything. I would deal with lawyers and lawsuits and the complicated business of untangling two lives woven together with lies. But tonight, I just sat in the darkness, mourning, not just the loss of Emily, but the loss of the man I'd been before I knew the truth. The man who'd believed in forever, who'd thought love conquered all, who'd trusted completely and been betrayed completely in return. That man was gone now, as surely as Emily was gone, as surely as our wedding was canceled. In his place sat someone harder, more careful, more aware of the ways people could lie to themselves and each other. Someone who understood that love without trust was just an elaborate form of self-deception. Someone who would never again mistake performance for reality or confuse the idea of a person with the person themselves. I finished my whiskey and went to bed alone, in sheets that still smelled like Emily's perfume, in a room where we'd made love and made plans and made promises that had meant everything to me and apparently nothing to her. But I slept deeply for the first time in months, the sleep of someone who finally knew the truth, no matter how much it hurt.